Hi everybody, Ian Smith of Ian Smith Photography here. Today's video is a bit personal. It's about why I choose photography as the best hobby in the world. And I think the way to discuss photography and what it can do for you is by telling you a little bit about my past. I don't want to make it self-indulgent. This definitely isn't a poor me story where I'm looking for sympathy or anything. It's just a journey, and we've all had those journeys. I would have thought most of us have a story to tell and have a history. Some will be great, and some will be not so great. And so I'll start off by saying I left school in the early 80s. The only sport I was ever introduced to, really, apart from sports at school, was tennis. And I came from a tennis family, and tennis very quickly became pretty much an everyday thing, ever since the age of 5 or 6, I guess. And that's not a bad thing. So I loved playing tennis, and I always felt inhibited a little bit. I always felt living in the shadow of my parents, or my father in particular. He was pretty good, and not the most encouraging of people. In fact, I'd put it the other way, probably about the most critical of people you would ever meet. And from that point of view, I either had to sink or swim, and I kind of did a bit of both. You know, I spent several years as a junior trying to be better, and I even remember a day where I played a tennis match, I think, and I was probably about 10 years old, and I offered the other guy £1 to let me beat him, just so I could get some praise. Anyway, so that was the kind of story. Then I left school at 16, and I kind of pretty much played tennis all day, and I became not too bad. You know, I mean, I was really competitive. I was really fast around the tennis court, although you probably wouldn't know it from my physique at the moment at the age of 54. But anyway, so I became quite good. I was probably what you would call a top club player, let's say, which is a reasonable level, but there are many, many levels way above that. Never very good at school, so when I left school, I didn't know what to do, really. Tennis coaching at that point in time wasn't a career that anybody would really, give you tuppence for. But anyway, I decided to give it a go, and I did a few training courses and became really into the idea of being a tennis pro coach. Now, that journey is a tale of a game of two halves, let's say, because I didn't conform to the system, and I guess that kind of sums up my character. I'm not one to conform to things. I find it difficult fitting into common beliefs or methods or whatever. I like to find my own path on these things. And tennis was very much like that. And of course, that kind of stubbornness held me back a lot. But anyway, I pushed myself to probably beyond what my capabilities were, in terms of if you want to nail a good job and you want to get respect of your peers and become well known, I think you have to travel, and that's exactly what I did. So this is great. So I ended up going to Norway, and I ended up being one of the national tennis coaches in Egypt, numerous other tennis jobs and numerous other tennis schools that I started before becoming a national tennis coach in Malta. And of course, these are all positions that probably 99% of tennis coaches would never get. So that's great. And as an average tennis player, I think, that's pretty good. And I think being average at tennis was actually something that held me back, because you can get judged on your abilities as a coach, on your ability to play, which in my case wasn't terrible by any means, but there are obviously an awful lot of players that are better than you. I think it's maybe easier these days to be recognised for coaching and not tennis and not playing level, but it certainly in my case it was a bit of a battle, and you have to try and punch your way through that, and I did, but it comes at a cost. And I think I find myself, certainly by the time I left Malta, which was actually only 5 years ago, is that I had extremely high blood pressure. Extremely high blood pressure, and it probably dates back to problems with the family and everything, and which still exists to this day. In fact, I have no contact with my family whatsoever. Lots of reasons, but I think these things all take their toll on you. And high blood pressure, very hard to control. No doctor managed to nail it in Malta. Probably it became quite difficult to deal with and everything. So this is it's not a sob story as such, but it's a story. Tennis has provided me with so many opportunities and traveling to great places and meeting some good people and everything. So I have no regrets as far as that's concerned. But it had reached the point where definitely I didn't want to participate anymore. I didn't want to be any part of the game. The politics was bullshit and I just wasn't interested any longer. So moving on. My family, we moved to Sweden in 2015 and I started photography. And that's where this video really is meant to start. But I think you had to know where I came from and the feeling that I had with high blood pressure and anxiety disorder and so on. And these things, particularly with medication and so on, it can be quite hard to control. Definitely in my case it was. I think anxiety was beating the blood pressure medication and so on. So it kept on sort of pushing through, and obviously you can't live very long with the blood pressure like I had. So, photography. Yeah, so where do I start with that? Got my camera, learned how to use it, and I think landscape photography was a natural thing for me to... I mean, we live in a beautiful place with nature everywhere, and it's a low population, so it's really easy to want to be in nature, around the seaside and the fantastic forests and the fields. And I started taking some very mediocre to rubbish pictures, as we all probably did when we started. But photography for me, I cannot thank it enough. My blood pressure started to go down. Now it's very manageable. And I say, yeah, that's photography. It's like this fantastic release, because you feel connected with nature. You're out in all hours of the day, probably early in the morning and late at night, the classic golden hour times for photography where nobody else is there. You're the only person on the beach or in the forest or on the rocks. You watch the sunrise, you watch the sunset, and I can only say, if you feel anxious or stressed out in that situation, then I think you have a much bigger problem than I had, for sure, because it was like a Valium. It kind of made me feel that was what was important in life. And I can tell you right here now, I was never artistic at school. In fact, probably the opposite. I was pathetic at these arty things. But I think as you get older, and certainly with this particular genre of photography, I studied a hell of a lot on YouTube. So that's the first. That's a big thing. But I became much more at peace with building a composition and looking at mistakes and learning from these mistakes. And now my images are probably okay. Always room for improvement. I want to get much better, but there is no pressure. And the point with the key word in photography I find is hobby, because I had this illusion that I might become a professional landscape photographer. And what I don't want to happen with photography is that I'm reliant on it for a source of income, because that's going to mean the same as tennis did, where you have to focus on the income and the tennis becomes less enjoyable as a result. And that's one thing that I don't think it will happen with photography, but I don't want it to be like that. So I'm going to say I'm a really mad keen hobby photographer, hobby landscape photographer, and I push myself to get better every day. And I've done quite well. I've sold a lot of prints. For a brief time I had a gallery. I have featured in exhibitions and in a couple of videos. I've been published in a few magazines. So, you know, I think I've been picked up, and that's good enough for me. At that level, that's great. And I feel good. I don't have a problem with my blood pressure. I always have to keep an eye on it. I have to keep taking the meds, but the meds work. And, you know, I have photography to thank for that. As far as stress is concerned, it was like putting a needle in a balloon. It was pop, and I feel great. You know, I feel photography as a result. Of course, I love being a father. I was a father late in life, almost to 50 when I had my baby, and she's now 5. And let me tell you, you know, fatherhood, you know, I've heard people that it can break some people. Anyway, it's made me, I absolutely love her, and I absolutely love being a dad. So don't, you know, there are other things other than photography that make life good. But photography for sure has been the catalyst that's opened my creative inner self, if you like, something I never thought was there. And the satisfaction that it gives me personally. And remember, you're leaving a legacy that could or will last a lifetime, a portfolio or a body of work which are there for your children to learn from, because the landscape that I take pictures of out here today may not be the same when she's 25, 35, 45. So there are an awful lot of things that you're actually leaving behind which are important. And photography is important. And I respect it. I respect nature far more now than I ever did. It gets you outdoors. It makes you feel good. You're healthy. Okay, I was going to say fit. The fitness took a dive when I left tennis, and I still have to work on that. But this is my sales pitch for photography, what it's provided with me. It's provided me with health, it's provided me with happiness, it's provided me with a feeling of well-being, it's provided me with more self-respect, because I'm putting out work that makes me feel good. So I'm going to stop rattling on, and I'm going to leave you with the message that, in my view, photography is the best hobby in the world. And if anybody is in the same position as me, or this resonates with some of you, then I'll feel very good about having presented this video to you. So with that, I'm going to leave you. I hope to see you in the next video really soon. Over and out from me. Bye for now.